Hello, Helga. One is here at least. 3 are here. Wonderful. And 6. So slowly the people are coming. I'm going to stand up and tell you from the beginning, for those who didn't know, this will be an English tour, okay? So we'll talk a little bit of English together. Is the sound okay? Is the picture okay? I hope you are all well and happy. And hi Martina, hi Marzena, and welcome to another Alpine Foxes tour, this time in English, and it will be a Jewish tour, Jewish history tour. I had number 1, like the first part, a couple of weeks ago, and it was a big success. So I said, okay, let's do number 2 and let's do a follow-up. Sound and picture, okay, wonderful, thank you very much. We will be a small group today, so it will be really intimate and very cozy, I suppose. Cozy, at least for you, hopefully. Not so much for me, because the weather is just horrible. It's wet and it's rainy. It's the ice saints are really, they are really doing their job. Okay, so it will be a Jewish history tour. And it will be a tour along a part of the Ring Avenue and then into the 9th district of Vienna, because on the first tour I did the city center. So on the first tour I focused mainly, hello Heidi, hello to Brisbane. I focused mainly on the medieval history of the Jewish people in Vienna, and also of course on the Shoah. This time it will be the late 19th century and the early 20th century, and also, of course, the Shoah, which always plays, unfortunately, a big role. So, I am starting now. So now I'm going, hi Alexandra, to Scotland. Hello, how great is that? So I'm going to turn this around. And it worked. And I'm going to grab my umbrella. And then off we go. So before I leave my little cave here in the Burgtheater, I have new glasses. Yes, thank you, Martin. Before I leave my little dry cave here at the side of the Burgtheater, let me tell you a little bit about the time we are now going to walk through, with our imagination. Let's put it like this. You have to imagine that until the year 1858, here in Vienna was still the old big city wall. So you can say that this house over there and this house did not exist in that time. And Vienna looked pretty medieval, very picturesque, small. You could just see the spires of the churches behind the city wall, and so on and so forth. And in 1858, Emperor Franz Joseph wrote this very famous Handbillet, as it is called, where he says that he wanted the city wall to be taken down and that the city should grow and be put together with the old little villages in front of the city wall, and that there should be a beautiful street around the city instead of the old city wall. And so in 1858 they started taking down the old city wall and started building all these impressive buildings, the government buildings, the culture buildings, like, for example, I'm dealing with my umbrella. Over there you see the roof of the university, and you see the little top of the spires of Votive Church, and in a few seconds you're going to see the city hall, and I am here standing in front of the Burgtheater. So all the official buildings were built in a time period of about 50 years. So a long, long time. Vienna was one big construction site. And the emperor and the government said, it's very expensive to build all these amazing buildings. Why don't we sell the lots in between, the empty lots along the Ring Avenue in between, to wealthy families? And these wealthy families were many Jewish families. Because, and I'm going to start walking now because I want to cover a lot of ground today, because in the year 1860 another important thing happened, and that was Austria got a constitution. And in that constitution, let's have a look at the city hall over there, and in that constitution was written that for the first time in the history of the monarchy, every person in the whole monarchy had the same rights and was completely equal. And Jewish people for the first time were allowed to own lots, to own land, and to build their houses on the land. It was not that there were no wealthy people in Vienna before that time, but they were not allowed to own places, you know, and own land. So now, starting in 1860 approximately, for the first time Jewish people were allowed to buy land in the city. And this is exactly what happened, for example, here. This is a very good example here. This lot was apparently bought by the Lieben-Auspitz family. This is why we call this beautiful building the Palais Lieben-Auspitz. These were 4 siblings, Jewish people, who were wealthy, who had a big like industry founded. They produced sugar. They made all their money with sugar, but they were also very educated people. Some of them were scientists. Some of them was in chemistry. One of them was a poet. One of them was a medical doctor, and so on. And of course, they were also interested in the arts. That is also something very important. So, those 4 siblings built this house, the Palais Lieben-Auspitz, for themselves. They lived in the different floors of this beautiful house. And from the beginning, there was a famous coffee house on the ground floor. It is still existing. You see, 150 years, Café Landmann. So it was already here when this house was first built. And this is a very good view. I talked about the time when the city wall was still existing. Do you see at the end of that little road the city wall? A little part and very, very little houses. So this is old Vienna. This is old Vienna as it looked until 1858. And this here is new Vienna as it started to look starting in 1858. And so this is not the only palace that was owned by a wealthy Jewish family along the Ring Avenue. There are lots of them all around the city center, like the Palais Epstein, the Palais Efrossi, Palais Todesco, Palais Schei, and so on and so forth. And many of these families were related to each other and intermarried or so. And it might be interesting for you to know that Anna von Lieben-Auspitz, so the wife of one of the owners, was one of the early patients of Sigmund Freud, who came to Café Landmann practically each and every day. So, the situation that we had at the end of the 19th century regarding the Jewish people in Vienna was as follows. We had the very wealthy people here that owned houses like the Palais Lieben-Auspitz, who were ennobled by the emperor. We call them the Ring Avenue barons. We had those upper middle class and middle class people who lived in the districts like 8 and 9, like Sigmund Freud and Arthur Schnitzler and so on. And then we had the poor Jewish people in the 2nd and 20th district. So these were the 3, you could say, social classes. And today we are going to learn more about the very wealthy people and the upper middle class people. One floor in this house was rented out to a lady, and here is a plaque, and it says in this house used to be from 1917 to 1938 the salon of the fighter for peace and writer Bertha Zuckerkandel. Let me tell you about Bertha Zuckerkandel while we are moving on a little bit along the Café Landmann. You see the people sitting inside the coffee house. Wow, lots of people queuing. I have to go all around. Everyone wants to sit in the nice warm coffee house and dry coffee house. It's very understandable, of course. So, the foxes going out for you. even in the meanest weather, but you know that already. How are you all doing? Are you fine? I hope so. So, Berta Zuckerkandel had her salon in here, in this beautiful Halle Liebenau-Spitz. And what is a salon? A salon used to be, especially in the 19th century, partly also in the 18th century, I think that's when it really started in France, in Paris, used to be the house, the apartment of usually a lady, upper class lady, who was interested in the arts and who was interested in networking, who wanted to bring interesting, wealthy, important people together in her house for talks, but also to help the artists, for example, and so on. And this is what Berta Zuckerkandel did. In her salon, which used to be in the Palais Liebenau-Spitz, so I'm going to turn around once more quickly to show you a glimpse of the house once more. My fox is on the run. So here you see it. It's a lighter house, the nice pink colors. That's the Palais Liebenau-Spitz. It was real. Inside it was absolute 19th century splendor, yeah, with a lot of heavy oak furniture, a lot of rugs, and pretty dark, at least the rooms of the Liebenau-Spitz family. Not so much the rooms of Berta Zuckerkandel, because we know that she was a fan of Joseph Hoffmann, and that Joseph Hoffmann also designed the interior of her apartment and also was the architect of her and her husband's house in the 19th district in Nusswaldgasse. So they lived here in the first district and also in Nusswaldgasse. And they loved the architecture of Joseph Hoffmann, who was definitely not a designer of historistic architecture. Over there you can see a little part of the city wall with the smaller houses on them. And on the other side of the street, don't want to turn around too quickly, this is our main university. When you go into the courtyard of our main university or into the entrance hall, then you will see a plaque talking about the many Nobel Prize winners of our university, or of Austria, many of them Nobel Prize of Medicine. And many of them, let me tell you, were Jewish. Let's talk about them a little bit later and a little bit more intense, if I don't forget. So this is the wonderful building of the university. So some more information about the salon of Berta Zuckerkandel. Who met in Berta Zuckerkandel's salon? That was, for example, Gustav Klimt, Joseph Hoffmann, of course, so members of the Secession, members of the Vienna Workshop, but also writers like Hugo von Hofmannsthal. And we know that the famous play, Jedermann, was read aloud in public for the first time in the salon of Berta Zuckerkandel. But at the same time, also scientists used to meet in her salon. For example, Ernst Mach, who was a very famous physicist. We all know the Machsche number. So he was a physicist, but also a philosopher and a member of the so-called Viennese circle or Wiener Kreis, which was a circle of philosophers. That was a very, very important philosopher school here in Vienna and had a big impact on the development of philosophy in the 19th and 20th century in the whole world. So you see how many different people came to Berta Zuckerkandel's salon, and so they came together, they exchanged their ideas, they talked. Artists met the people who later wanted to have paintings of them and so on. So those salons were fascinating places and important places for artists and scientists and wealthy people at the same time. So, another palace that was owned by a very wealthy Jewish family was the one here in front of me. also. You see here, more and more people are joining me. I like that. That's great. We are now standing in front of the Palais Efroussi. And some of you might know the name already. Again, I want to show you a plaque. I have to go across the little street here again. The Palais Efroussi was built, of course, by the Efroussi family. That was a family that came originally from Odessa. And Ignaz Efroussi then settled down here in Vienna. And he had sons who he sent to the other important cities of Europe, like London and Paris. And everywhere they opened banks. And in the end, the family was so wealthy that they could build beautiful houses for themselves, like this here. Palais Efroussi, built 1827 and 1872 and 1873 by Theophil Hansen, a famous architect. That was, of course, important, you know, to have a famous and good architect make your house. It says that Ignaz Ritter von Efroussi, so he was already a noble, built this house and he lived here with his family. And that in 1938 he was forced to leave their hometown, Vienna, and also their home here, the Palais Efroussi. So let me go across the street now while it's really raining. It's a heavy rain right here. Nicholas is going to laugh. Dear Lord, blimey, it's raining. So, okay, so I'm going to cross the street and turn around because I want to show you the whole size of the Palais Efroussi, and of course also tell you a little bit more about the story of this building. Let's find a good position. So there it is. Here you have the whole building. It's a beautiful building. They had a big art collection inside, a very famous art collection. And in 1938, they lost everything when they had to emigrate. The art collection had to stay here. One part of the art collection was a collection of little Japanese netsukes. These are little figurines made of wood or ivory. And we know that the collection of netsuke was saved by their housekeeper and given back to the family after the war. And one of the members of the family, his name was Edmund de Waal, wrote a book about this house. And the name of the book is The Hare, like the bunny, with the ember eyes. And it tells the story of the family, how the family came from Odessa, how they proudly bought the lot here, how they proudly built their house here, how they had festivities here and parties and whatsoever, and how finally in 1938 they had to leave and go into emigration and could be happy to save their lives. Edmund de Waal is the name of the author, and The Hare with the Ember Eyes is the name of the book. Starting in 1938, a Nazi office was in here on the first floor. I'll point it out here on this floor. I have to carry my umbrella. It was the so-called Amt Rosenberg, and Adolf Rosenberg was more or less the one who was in charge of most of the deportations and murderings of Jewish people in the so-called eastern provinces. That means mainly Poland. Which I think is quite interesting because not too many people know his name. All the people know Eichmann and the other horrible guys, but Rosenberg has a really Jewish-sounding name, and I only found out about him when I started doing research for a specific Jewish tour a couple of years ago. So very cynical that Rosenberg was in the most beautiful rooms of the palace of the Efroussis. So now we are walking along the Ring Avenue. For those who are watching, just lean back and enjoy the scenery a little bit. while I'm walking here along the street. The air is wonderful. I like the rainy air, but I would like to have some sunshine as well at some point. Please, can we have some sunshine? All right. So all the beautiful buildings that you see now along the street, or at least most of them, these are all these famous Ring Avenue palaces that were owned by single families. Some of them were also planned as apartment buildings. Just have a look at this here. It's another example of one of those Ring Avenue palaces. And also the Yellow Neighbor building. So this is really 19th century splendor that we are looking at here. On the other side of the street used to be a very famous theater. This building is not the theater. The theater burned down at the end of the 19th century. There was a horrible fire. And after that fire, so now I'm going to cross the street again without killing myself. But fortunately, I'm very fast. My legs are short, but they are fast. So, now the wind is also coming. Fighting the elements. Here I am. All right. So, here is another plaque. This is the tour of plaques. And it says, in memory of the victims of the Ring Theater fire. And here at the place of the Ring Theater, which burned down on the 8th of December 1881, Emperor Franz Joseph built the so-called Sühnhaus, and this was destroyed in the Second World War. So nowadays this is of course not an old building. This is a 1950s, 60s building. It's the headquarters of our police, as you can see. But before that, here was a very beautiful apartment house after the Ring Theater burned down. And guess who the first tenants of this apartment house were? It was Sigmund Freud and his wife Martha. And 3 of the children of Sigmund Freud and his wife were born here in the Sühnhaus at the Ring Avenue. So it was basically a very good address where Sigmund Freud used to live, only the apartment was very small. And I think at a certain point he said, I need a larger apartment. I can't stand live in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 kids anymore. It's impossible. I don't know if he really said that, but I would guess that's what he said. So now I have to walk a little bit, and because we are now walking over to the 9th district of Vienna. While I'm walking, let me tell you who was born here at the Ring Avenue in the neighbor building of the big beautiful white house that I just showed you. That was a writer. That was Stephan Zweig, famous Austrian writer. He was also Jewish. So when I'm talking about people on this tour, automatically I'm talking about Jewish people. So that just that you know, all right? Because this is apparently a Jewish tour. So the Jewish novelist Stephan Zweig was born here at the Ringstrasse. He was a follower of Sigmund Freud, you could say. He had a letter exchange with Sigmund Freud, and in one of the letters he wrote to Freud, without your work, it wouldn't have been possible to do my work. So he was one of the many artists who were incredibly inspired by the new ideas and new theories of Sigmund Freud. And while we are walking here, let me tell you another interesting, or hopefully interesting, detail. And just look at those. We are not at the Ring Avenue anymore, but look how beautiful the buildings still are. This is already the 9th district, so here we are already more in the middle class, upper middle class people. You see? A little maybe interesting detail for you. Of course, at the end of the 19th century, Vienna was there was still monarchy. here, yeah? And Vienna was in a certain way split into two halves. On one side, there was the aristocratic half, yeah, the emperor and so on. They were very, very conservative. They supported the conservative arts and artists, like Hans Mackart, for example, and more old-fashioned composers and so on. Especially Emperor Franz Joseph and Archduke Franz Ferdinand absolutely disliked everything modern. So they hated the architecture of Otto Wagner, for example. But on the other hand, there was the new nobility, the Jewish nobility along the Ring Avenue. And they were the supporters of the modern arts. They spent a lot of money on paintings. They supported Gustav Klimt, later also Egon Schiele. They were always searching for the new streams in the arts. So they were the supporters of modernist Vienna. And I think that the fact that there were those two streams in Vienna, those two sides, made the city at the end of the 19th century so incredibly interesting, so inspiring. It was inspired by other cities and inspired other parts of Europe. We are now standing in front of a school. Nicholas Fox will have fond memories, I suppose, because this was his school. So we are in Wassergasse school, and I'm here because here in Wassergasse, don't tell anyone that I'm crossing the street when the light is red. So here in the Wassergasse school, there were a couple of really famous students, and I want to point out at least two of them. I told you, this is the tour of the plaques. More plaques are coming up. But also the tour of the beautiful buildings, isn't it? So first of all, I want to point out Erich Fried. Erich Fried was also a writer. He was born here in Vienna. He was born in the 9th district. This is also the reason why he went exactly to this school here. And he had to emigrate in the year 1938 after a horrible thing that happened. His father was taken to the Gestapo prison on Morsienplatz, and he was tortured there so horribly, and then sent back home, that Fried basically watched him die at home on the sofa in the living room of the family, and he could never really get over this situation. So he emigrated. He became a very radical socialist then in England, and he never really returned to Vienna. So one of those many who really was traumatized by the things that happened here. But it says he visited from 1931 to 1938 the Vasa Gymnasium. Also, friends, Marcel Pravi. Maybe some of you know Marcel Pravi. Who knows Marcel Pravi? Give me a heart if you know him. The opera specialist, Marcel Pravi. He was also Jewish. He was actually born, thank you. He was actually born in a hospital in the 8th district of Vienna, which was owned by a Jewish family, the Sanatorium Löw. And when you go there, the house still exists, and there is a plaque, not for Marcel Pravi, but for the Löw family, who sorry to say, committed suicide in 1938 when the Nazis took over. But in that hospital, Marcel Pravi was born. I still saw him in the opera explaining Carmen. And then finally, two other famous people. Karl Landsteiner was originally Jewish but converted to Catholicism. And he was one of the Nobel Prize winners for medicine of Austria. He won the Nobel Prize because he was the one who found the blood types. Yeah, so he was a pathologist, and he kind of revealed the secrets of the blood types, also of the rhesus factor, and he is one of the most important people when it came to polio. So he more or less detected the polio virus and also laid the basis for the polio vaccination. So an incredibly important man. He emigrated later, not because he was formerly Jewish, but he already emigrated after the First World War. And he emigrated to The Hague first and then to the United States. The sad thing is that although he was such a wonderful doctor, such a wonderful medical doctor, he could not help his wife who had cancer. And the last years of his life, he really developed into an oncologist and wanted, like, badly, he wanted to, or desperately, that is the better word, he wanted to find a possibility to save his wife. And in the end, he died in his laboratory, and his wife outlived him a couple of months. Karl Landsteiner's picture was also on one of our shilling bills. I don't remember on which one, so the old currency, but he was. Maybe Martin knows. Martin, if you know on which bill Stephan Zweig was not here. Who saw Stephan Zweig's name here? Yeah, he was. Hey, cool. Yeah, you saw it. Also a student of this. You see how we are interacting? I never saw him here. Yeah, so he was also a student of this school. Of this school here, Bundesgymnasium Wassergasse. And then, of course, Friedrich Thorberg, also a writer from 1919 to 1921, not a very long time. He went to this school. Who knows why he had to leave the school. So while I'm moving on, let me talk a little bit about Friedrich Thorberg. Friedrich Thorberg was also a son of this district, a son of the 9th district. He was actually born in the Porzellangasse 7A. That is not far from Sigmund Freud's place, by the way. So that is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, at least for me it's fascinating to think that all these people walked through the streets of Vienna more or less at the same time. Sigmund Freud lived here, Arthur Schnitzler lived here, Theodor Herzl lived here, Thorberg, Fried, Gustav Mahler. All these people that I mentioned now were Jewish people, and there were many amazing people also who were not Jewish people. Yeah, they all went through the streets of Vienna at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. I always like to think about those things. I think they are fascinating. And all this creativity, all this, this inspiration was of course gone in the year 1938 when most of the people emigrated, and many of them who could not manage to emigrate were killed and deported and killed in concentration camps. We are now coming into a very, very famous street. I don't know if you can read it. We are now in Berggasse. Berggasse was for 47 years the home of Sigmund Freud. But, you see, this is the incredible Berg. Berg means mountain. This is the mountain here. But not too many people know that it was not only Sigmund Freud who lived here, but here in this yellow house at the corner also lived for a short period of time Theodor Herzl. Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism. That person who had the idea to create a home, an own state for the Jewish people. And why did he do that? The answer is that at the beginning he was a totally, just like Freud, a totally assimilated person. He was originally from Budapest, he came here to Vienna, he wrote for a newspaper, the New Free Press, the Neue Freie Presse, and he was one of those people, I'm going to move on, you saw the house now, who was one of those people who were Jewish people who were absolutely assimilated, who saw themselves primarily as Viennese and as Austrians, but not as Jews. Sigmund Freud, by the way, called himself the godless Jew. So, Herzl lived here. Let me show you the house once more and enjoy the view of the other houses here. This is neighborhood feeling, yeah? So this is where real people really live and work. This is why it's so quiet on a Sunday. This is the house of Theodor Herzl. He also lived in a different house a little bit later. Oh, Martin said that he was on the last 1,000 shilling bill, Karl Landsteiner. All right. So, Herzl was assimilated, and then he was sent as a journalist to Paris, because there was a trial in Paris about a Jewish general of the French army who was accused of treason. And it was a very anti-Semitic process. And there were incredible, while Herzl was there, incredible anti-Semitic riots in the streets of Paris. And he was really afraid. And he said, oh my God, what's happening here? Yeah, I mean, apparently the Jewish people will have a big problem one day in the not so far future. And that is the point when he started to think about creating a state for the Jewish people, where they could be together, where they could be on own, where they could be safe, where the idea of Zionism was created, more or less. Herzl was never in Israel, never saw his dream come true. Oops, let me go across the street here. I do some workout for you today. So, show you Berggasse again. Tell you this Herzl story. Or finish the Herzl story. So, Theodor Herzl never saw Israel. He died. He was only 43 years old when he died in a little village very close to Vienna, in the mountains south of Vienna, in Edlach an der Rax. He already had a very weak heart, and he died from a heart attack. And he was buried here in Vienna. And the interesting thing is, when you go to the Döblinger Cemetery in the 19th district of Vienna, then you will still see the grave of Theodor Herzl and his parents there. Of course, he's not in the grave anymore, because now he is in Jerusalem on Herzl Mountain, of course. But the grave is still existing. It's always nice and clean, and many people go there and put stones there. So it's a place of remembrance for the founder of Zionism, who lived very, very close, practically next door, to the founder of psychoanalysis. And that was Sigmund Freud, the before-mentioned Sigmund Freud, who had one of his first patients in the Palais Lieben Auspitz, and who liked to go into Café Landmann, which was also in Café Lieben Auspitz. So more or less everything was intertwined. You meet Freud everywhere, you meet Schnitzler everywhere. That's what I wanted to say already before, that it must have been a really fascinating time. So the house on the left side is the famous Berggasse 19. This is the house where Sigmund Freud really lived for 47 years of his life. You remember when we were at the Ring Avenue, I talked about the Sühn house that was built instead of the Ring Theater that burned down. That was the first apartment of Freud after his wedding with Martha Freud. And after the birth of his third child, he was looking for a larger apartment, and he finally found it here in Berggasse 19. The story goes that Martha was not even asked if she wanted to live in this apartment. He saw the apartment and immediately signed the contract, and that she apparently was quite grumpy because he hadn't bothered to ask her. But in the end, she also lived here for 47 years. The three other children were born here at this address. And the apartment was where you see the lights in the floor below the balconies. That would have been the apartment that Martha would have preferred. The apartment with the bay windows and the balconies and so on. But she had to live in the mezzanine which is the floor below. And where you see the lights, this is now the Sigmund Freud Museum. Let me go a little bit closer that you can read the sign properly. It's a very famous address, and now people from all over the world are coming back again to see the place where psychoanalysis was born, and where also psychoanalysis as a movement started and quickly went all around the world. We are not yet finished. I have no idea what time it is. Nicholas will tell me. Wie spät ist es? Perfect. Perfect timing. Because I want to take you a little bit further on in this area here. We are now here in the Servitenviertel, a very beautiful neighborhood in the 9th district of Vienna. This is the neighborhood of Sigmund Freud. So this is where he walked his dogs, where he bought his cigars. Also another famous book existing, it's called The Tobacconist. It tells the story of the tobacconist and Freud, and the discussions that the tobacconist has with Sigmund Freud whenever Freud buys his cigars at the tobacco store. It's also the neighborhood of a person who was not Jewish, Mr. Lohner, who built the first car here, the first electro car. And we are looking here into Porzellangasse, and the White House, I'll point it out, the White House on the left side is Porzellangasse 7A, and probably you remember who was born there? Remember? It was Friedrich Thorberg, the writer, whose most famous book probably is the Tante Jolesch. It's a book that I really love. And when I do tours here in this area, I always read stories from the Tante Jolesch, because it's a book that talks a lot about that time, the late 19th century, about those social circles we just talked about the Jewish coffee houses and so on. I always call it a bittersweet book, because on one side, on one page, it is so funny that you can smile and you can laugh, and then on the next page it's so sad, because so many lives and so many stories don't exist anymore. I mean, the stories still exist, but the lives not anymore. So big recommendation. Read the Tante Jolesch. It's wonderful. Yeah, we are here in Servitengasse. This is the main street here in this quarter, in Serviten quarter. Can you hear the rain? Usually, and you just have to believe me, that sometimes when it is warm in this city, and it can be warm in the city, there are people sitting outside everywhere. It has a little feeling of Montmartre or so. It's also called the little Paris of Vienna. It's a very pretty, street, and the main part of the street is the square, that's Serviten Square. And this is the square with the big church that was originally in the middle of this little village. So what has this area, where is the connection to Jewish history? You could ask now. The connection is, as I mentioned before, that in the 19th century many Jewish people lived here, assimilated people, lawyers, doctors. 70% of all the doctors in Vienna were Jewish in that time. They lived in those beautiful houses here. I mean, this is still a very nice area to live. And so this was a very Jewish-dominated area. And in 1938, many of them managed to leave. Many of them did not manage to leave, and were deported finally. And the apartments here and in other parts of the city where primarily Jewish families used to live were used as so-called collective apartments for Jewish families by the Nazis. That means about 60,000 apartments in Vienna had to be left by their originally Jewish tenants all these people had to move into collective apartments where they had to live in a very crowded situation, sometimes a couple of families together in one apartment. And from the collective apartment, they were brought to a collective camp, which was usually a school in the 2nd or 20th district of Vienna. And from those schools, they were brought to train stations and then deported to concentration camps. This is something I mentioned already in the first tour, but I wanted to tell you again. Yeah, so especially because this area here, as beautiful as it is, has this history as well. Yeah, that many of the apartments here were used as collective apartments for Jews. And at the end of this tour, I want to show you a little memorial that is dealing with this topic. I'm not sure if we can see it properly because it's so wet today, but we will just try. So I hope you are enjoying the tour. Give me a heart if you like it. Okay. So, there are always more than 50 people, so yes, there are the hearts. That's good. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, okay, this is what I wanted to show you at the end of this tour. This is the famous memorial that was, I think, opened or revealed in the around 2000 or so, or 2010, I'm not so sure anymore. What you can see here are keys and name tags attached to the keys. And what is it all about? So we had in the Freud Museum a big exhibition which was called Freud's Lost Neighbors. We wanted, I say we because I also work in the Freud Museum, we wanted to find out who the people were who had to live in Freud's apartment after his emigration. Because many guests asked us, what happened with Freud's apartment after his emigration? And we found out that it was used as a collective apartment. And later, when all people were deported and killed, then it was given to non-Jewish people, to Nazis. And we had many visitors from this area here, especially from Servitengasse, who are tenants from Servitengasse, and who said, we also want to know if our apartment was originally rented by a Jewish family, or if it was a collective apartment. And we helped them to do the research because we knew, because of our exhibition, how to do the research. And then they collected all the information. And in the end, they also wanted to have a memorial for all the people, the Jewish people, who lived and partly also suffered in their old apartments. And this is the memorial here. It was a competition that was won by a young student at the Academy of Applied Arts. And she had the idea to collect the old keys and then just put the name tags on it. I don't know if you can read some of the names, but I often stand here with guests, with American guests, with Jewish family members who were killed in the Shoah, for example. And then they are standing here and say, oh, I know someone with this name, and so on. It's usually a memorial that that makes people very emotional, although it's very simple, and but it's very powerful. All right, my friends, so I have to stand under the tree now. This is the end of our tour. We planned it for 45 minutes, and I really hope that you liked it. It's always exciting. I'm always a little bit doubtful. Here I am again, as wet as a poodle. I'm always a little bit doubtful if Jewish tours should be made as live streams, but I hope I could make it properly. Yeah, this is a thing that is very close to my heart. This is something that is a tricky topic, if you understand what I mean. Yeah. So, but I wanted to do the second part. Maybe you want to watch the first part as well. I think it's already on YouTube, and it's definitely still on our Facebook page. Yeah, that is about the first district Jewish history, and this is part number 2. Okay, so next stream will be a German stream again, and it will be from Paris. And I hope many of you come with me. Yeah, I would be so thrilled. I'm so excited to go to Paris with you and to take you around in the footsteps of Marie Antoinette. So join us next Saturday. It's on Facebook, so join us again. I would be very happy. If you want, you can also buy me a beer or a wine or a coffee or whatever through Buy Me a Coffee. And yeah, have a wonderful Sunday. For the mothers amongst you, have a wonderful Mother's Day. Congratulations. I'm also a proud mother. And stay happy, stay healthy until we see each other again. And don't forget, those who are here in Vienna or who are planning to come to Vienna very soon, don't forget that we also have in-person tours. So look them up on Eventbrite. Take care. All the best. Until next time. Goodbye. Bye.